In English, we just say love. But in Sanskrit, in Indian languages, there are so many words that describe love. So that's what I was just confirming on Google. In Sanskrit, depending on who you read, some say there are 72 words for love, some say there are 96, some say there may be even more. I don't know all of them, but I know a few of them which you may also be familiar with, and they all have these different shades of love. So prem, preeti, anurag. When you say anurag, because there is rag, then the idea of attachment also comes in, the vital part comes in. You have rati, which is more of the sensual love, or the beauty and love together. Rati is supposed to be the wife of Kamadeva. Kama also, that word is also used as love. Anurakti, Preeti, Kandarp. Kandarp is another name for Madan, which is Kamadev. That also word is used as love. Then you have Vatsalya. Even Karuna. Karuna is when compassion and love come together. So there are so many words. I mean, these are just, I probably shared just 7 and 8, but one can do one research and find, those 92 or 76 words for love. So apparently our ancestors also had difficulty pointing out what is love. So each kind of emotion, each kind of sentiment, each feeling, each vibration, they tried to distinguish by giving different names to it. And it could be a very interesting study if somebody is interested in languages and Sanskrit particularly, to look at the etymological root of each of these words and then discern what that particular sentiment or that feeling or that emotion may be. But there is one other much broader or an even deeper way to understand love, and that's what we will be discussing right now, which is love as a force. Love as a force that is the cause for everything, for every emotion, every sentiment, every feeling. It's a force that descends from some higher realms, and it does its work. So if there is no love, there is no existence. So love as a force. So I'll just start with few words from the mother and Sri Aurobindo on this, and then we will, which one is that? Yeah, love as a universal force. Okay, so I'll start with reciting few lines from Savitri, because again I'll go back to the beautiful presentation that the little children did yesterday, where they read one line from Savitri and they explained it, and then they just briefly described what is Savitri. Savitri is a poem of love, hope, and so many different things they said. So I thought, well, why not just start with few lines from Savitri which describe love. And I thought I'll just read those lines, but then I'm just putting it on the screen also so you can follow it more closely that way. And we won't be discussing, making it too intellectual exercise out of it, but it speaks of love and maybe gradations of love, how love also evolves. So I'll start with this. All our earth starts from mud and ends in sky. And love that was once an animal's desire, then a sweet madness in the rapturous heart, an ardent comradeship in the happy mind, becomes a wide spiritual yearning space. Let's read these lines again. And love that was once an animal's desire, then a sweet madness in the rapturous heart, an ardent comradeship in the happy mind, becomes a wide spiritual yearning space. A lonely soul passions for the alone, The heart that loved man thrills to the love of God. A body is his chamber and his shrine. Then is our being rescued from separateness. All is itself, all is new felt in God. A lover leaning from his cloister's door. Cloister is like a monastery, a refuge, some religious, typically the religious kind of a monastery. A lover leaning from his cloister's door gathers the whole world into his single breast. Then shall the business fail of night and death. When unity is won, when strife is lost, and all is known and all is clasped by love, who would turn back to ignorance and pain? So here love is seen as the cure for all ignorance, all pain, all suffering, all night, and even death. That love has the potential to even carry death. To cure or to conquer death. And in simple ways we can understand it when we say, when someone dies, the love doesn't die with the person, right? The love can continue even when the object of love is no more. So that's on a very simple level. On a much deeper metaphysical level, that's a whole other thing. We won't go there. But I thought just to give you some hints as to how far one can go in understanding what love is. In one of his writings, Sri Aurobindo says, and this is one of my favorite lines from this particular writing, even though the writing is actually a political writing done during his revolutionary days. But this sentence comes there: love is a sacred name, but it is easier to speak of love than to love. Oh boy, the pain that comes with love, right? So pain is also a 4-letter word and love is also a 4-letter word. So with this disclaimer that it is easier to speak of love than to love, I also want to add one personal disclaimer that I don't know how Narendraji feels, but I am going to put this out very bluntly. Just because I am on this side of the table talking about love and human relationships from a spiritual perspective, in no way means that I have conquered all the problems that come with love, or that I'm anywhere close to really living the kind of pure love that Mother and Sri Aurobindo speak of. We are all work in progress, and it is very likely that after the sessions today, I might have an argument with my husband over phone. So that is also part of love. So just this disclaimer is out there. It does not mean that I am over these problems. We are all together in this exploration. Yeah? So just wanting to put that out there. Now, from where does everything begin? From where does love come? Right? So I'll have to tell a little story that Mother used to say, and in one session with the children also, somebody asked a question and that story fitted in very well. So maybe a few teachers, I think Radha ji was there that day, and maybe 1 or 2 other people were there. So they might have heard me, but I'll add few more things to the story, make it a little teacher, at the level of teachers, not at the level of children. So love is when divine sacrifices itself to descend into the depths of inconscience. It plunges itself into inconscience so that Srishti can begin, so that manifestation can begin. So love is that ray from above. If you read the very first few lines of Savitri, that's how it starts. That there is a ray from above that comes down into the deep inconscience and things stir. So Mother, instead of explaining this in a metaphysical way, she explained these things as stories and different versions of that. So her story goes like this, that on the at the highest superconscient plane, where everything is all one, that one existence, there is a complete ecstasy of oneness, complete bliss of oneness, right? So because there is only one, there is only oneness, there is complete bliss, nothing, no stir of any kind, because it is with the stir things like pain and suffering comes in. So there is complete ecstasy of oneness. But then one fine day, this one supreme in its complete ecstasy of oneness thought, or maybe brooded, or something happened, and this one entity felt what it would be like to experience joy of union. Now these are two different things. When you use the word union or unity, there means that there is that separateness. There are two. Yoga is yuj, right? Unite. That means there are two things at least which will be united, right? So there is bliss of oneness, but there is a different kind of joy when two things come together. So to experience this joy of union, this one concentrates on itself and becomes two. And it was so interesting when I was sharing this with the children. One girl came afterwards. She said, I had this vision of like the single-celled organism splitting and becoming two. So you see how in the physical plane also the same reality can continue. So one becomes two, and the two that comes out of the one, which is actually essentially one with one, we philosophers or mystics have given that name, given that entity name as the energy of one, or Shakti of that one supreme source, or consciousness force, conscious force of that one. In other words, we also use the term divine Shakti. So if there is divine one entity, it is the Shakti of the divine, not separated, but just for the purpose of this play, to experience the joy of union, the one has now become two. And then maybe they think, oh, what a beautiful experience this is. To experience this joy of union, let's keep playing the game more and more, and from two become many. Yeah, so divine Shakti is given this charge of starting this game of becoming many. And to start with, the Shakti sends out 4 emanations. Out of itself, out of the same two who are one, 4 emanations are sent out, and we can call these emanations, one is truth, one is consciousness or light, that is second, third can be life itself, and fourth can be, I always forget the fourth one. Delight. Thank you. Who you were there? Right, Radhaji was there. Delight. Okay, so delight, life, consciousness or light, and truth. And they are emanated, they are manifested out of divine Shakti with complete freedom, and they start their work. They start their work in now, which has become an existence or a manifestation. Earlier it was all absorbed in that one supreme source. Now it has started to expand itself. So the words Brahman, many of you may be familiar with the word Brahman itself means that is vast, that is expanding itself. Brihat, right? Brihat Mumbai, Greater Mumbai when they call it. So it's the vastness as the expansion of that. So now the manifestation has begun from 1 to 2 to 4, and these 4 emanations which comes out of the divine Shakti and the divine source, because they are emanated in complete freedom, as they continue their journey, they descend from the higher planes to lower and lower, they start to get a sense that we are completely free. Why do we need to keep referring to our source? So they gradually start cutting themselves from the original source, from the original supreme. And as they keep plunging down and down and down, they end up becoming, they sever all connect with all thread that binded them with the supreme source, and they end up becoming their exact opposites. So delight becomes suffering, life becomes death, light or consciousness becomes inconscience or darkness, and truth becomes falsehood. And as it happens, a cry goes from below, and the Supreme Shakti, remember this is told as a story, so visualize it. It's not that there are two people sitting up there listening to this cry. So this Supreme and the Supreme Shakti say, oops, something wrong has happened. And a ray of love, this is what Mother describes, a ray of love descends from the Supreme Source in response to that cry from below. That there is death, there is suffering, there is darkness, there is, the other falsehood. So save it. So a cry to be saved goes from below, and in response, a ray of love descends down, plunges itself into the darkest inconscience so that things can be straightened out. This is the sacrifice of the divine. Divine as love plunges itself into the inconscience so that Srishti can begin. Existence, manifestation can begin. But that's why it's said that the first children of the divine Shakti or divine mother are those 4 asuras, the original asuras. In the meanwhile, while this is happening, these 4 asuras emanate more little babies out of themselves, and suffering and pain and death and darkness takes many different forms. So they are in the inconscience doing their work, but to save the existence so that they are not the only beings out there to create this havoc, to create this chaos, a ray of love is sent out. Now, of course, to the children in ashram, Mother would describe this as a story, but to the older people who were asked these questions, she would describe her visions where she experienced these things. She experienced herself in identity with that divine ray of love. And she had also had another vision where she saw that this ray of love sometimes also takes the form of a being lying on, as if on a beautiful white ocean with beautiful, colors of emeralds and rubies and other beautiful minerals. If you think about it, what does this image tell you? Of the Ananta Shayana Vishnu sleeping on the ocean. Huh? Right, on Kshir Sagar. And I can give you the exact date. I was reading it a couple of days ago. I've forgotten the exact date where she describes this vision very clearly to a French disciple. So these were also things that she experienced within herself when she was deep in trance, deep in contemplation. And this is how she described the story, that when the ray of love plunges itself, along with that, 4 new emanations are sent out, because the order has to be set. So the same original 4 emanations are sent out, but this time with a little extra effort, which is that some small connection with the Supreme Source, some spark of that is kept within each of the emanations. So that when they plunge or when they come down, They do not cut themselves off completely, but it is that little spark, that little entity that keeps the thread open. And that is what we, in our simple understanding, can look at it as the divine entity, the divine spark, the light hiding in each one of us, which connects us to that Supreme. And it is in that little light actually love resides. In that little spark, in integral yoga we call it as psychic spark or psychic entity, which is the source of that love, the divine love. So it is out of divine's love for her creation, her existence, that first she chooses to sacrifice herself. Sri Aurobindo called it as the holocaust of the mother. In Rig Veda, the term is Purusha Sukta. There is a sukta called Purusha Sukta in Mandala 10, which is about the Purusha, the Brahman, the Supreme Being sacrificing itself. And you read the description, those were the, a lot of symbolic language was used. You'll see that there is an actual cosmic being, the Purusha, and his eyelashes become this, his eyes become this, his skin, the hair on the skin become that. Every aspect of existence comes out of that being. So in Indian thought or in integral yoga as well, creator is not separate from creation. It is the creator which has become the creation. How? By sacrificing itself so that creation can happen. But another thing that the creator has done is put a little bit of itself into each aspect of creation, so that the joy of union can happen again, so that when that little divine entity, that little light in each aspect of creation takes a sankalp to connect with the divinity within, starts the process of yoga. See, that's why it's called union. Yoga is union. So when we become conscious of that little entity and want to aspire to grow more and more into that and allow that to become our key guiding spirit, we have started the process of yoga. We have started the path of uniting with that supreme source. And because there is that entity within, there is a possibility of our transformation. There is a possibility that using love, which is there in that psychic entity, we can transform ourselves and those 4 asuras and their, million, billion little babies who are also in us, because we are part of that same existence. There is a possibility of their transformation also. Right? So yes, asuras are the first children of the Divine Mother, and the 4 other emanations, in simple words we call it as the 4 original gods, the 4 devas. They are also, but they are younger children. The asuras are older children, and it is the entire Vedic deepest philosophy or symbology is this only, the battle between these devas and asuras, which are out there in the cosmos, of course, but they are also within us, because what is within us is also what is outside us. What is outside is also within us. Right? So from everything, this battle of devas and asuras, everything begins, and all our literature and art and all that are different expressions of this eternal fight. The Samudra Manthan that Narendra ji was mentioning earlier, and those of you who were here last year, we talked about that story. That is also, it's a timeless story. This drama is ongoing. Yeah? So love is that universal force which plunges itself into inconscience. We can call it love, we can call it Divine Mother. These are just words. But it's the Supreme's choice to completely give itself. So when Jayashree ji was mentioning about sacrifice, that's where this idea comes from. It's the divine. Because divine loves, so divine chooses to give itself. Can we do that? That's our thing. So this is love as divine force. this is another beautiful line from Savitri. To live, to love are signs of infinite things. Love is a glory from eternity's spheres. So love as a force, it comes from eternity, meaning timeless, no beginning, no end. Love is a glory from eternity's spheres. And yeah, I'm not going to read the full thing. So just to kind of bring these things a little closer to our understanding in more prose terms, love is a universal force, a supremely conscious power. It has the power to change. It has the power to heal. It has the power to transform. It has the power to even conquer pain and suffering and death. What you call love and think of as a personal or individual thing is only your capacity to receive and manifest this universal force. So when we say, oh, I have fallen in love, or I love so and so, it simply means that we at that moment have been open to receiving this force which is descending, and we are a medium to catch it. But then the problem is we also fall out of love. So what happens? Then the medium gets closed in, the receptacle within us gets closed, right? So the challenge or the sadhana part is to keep ourselves open. Because in our ordinary understanding, when let's say two people fall in love, they fall in love thinking that this is going to last forever. A month later, certain sides of the other person come up and say, no, this is not, you didn't reveal this side of me earlier. I'm not sure if I love you to that same extent, right? Because that's when mind starts to get in and all the vital, we begin to see, we forget that we were this open receptacle of this force of love and how beautiful everything felt. And Gana hai na, there are so many filmy songs. I mean, what poets have done. Aajkal paon zameen par padte nahi mere. I love that song. I mean, those of you who don't know Hindi, I don't know any other Kannada or Tamil song, but it's like, I don't feel like as if I'm walking on the ground. I'm like flying in the sky. The sequence on which this song comes, she's just newly fallen in love. So, paon pe hi zameen nahi padte bichari ke. So, she's just flying in love, right? But then, well, this story we will not discuss, but then pretty soon people can fall on the ground, right? Because the other sides of, other aspects of the object of love comes in. So what happens is that we forget that love is a universal force and I am just a receptacle. We confuse love with the object of love. Instead of loving love itself and that feeling of paon zameen par nahi padte, we say, okay, it is you are the object of love, but you are not what I thought you were. You get angry, you get cranky, you don't put your towel at the right place, you don't put your socks at the right place, this. So I don't know whether I can love you with that same ecstasy, that same intensity. But essentially love seeks eternity. When people fall in love, they don't say, this will end. Dekhte hain, ho gaya, dekhte hain kitna chalta hai. Nobody says this. Everybody says this is forever, right? So love seeks eternity because it is a universal, eternal power. That is why love seeks that. And because it is a complete, absolute self-giving, love also seeks intensity, right? Because from a divine Shakti perspective, the entire existence is so beautiful. Love also seeks beauty. Love also seeks delight. Love also seeks harmony. But when we don't get that, then the arguments and the loves begins to disappear and vital and mind take over. The psychic begins to withdraw and the vital, the emotional heart. We confuse love with the emotive heart. Love actually resides in that little psychic entity. The more we can bring the psychic entity to surface, the more purified love can get. And the more we can begin to experience these eternity and delight and intensity and harmony and all these things. But because that little entity is veiled and hiding itself so far behind, and on the surface is our everything else, our emotional self, our vital self, our sentimentality, the movies we have seen about love, the novels that we have read about love, which they all end at happily ever after. They don't show when the hero and the heroine get married, how they argue. Nobody, typically movies don't show that. The romance novels don't show that. So that's why we suffer, because those asuras are also working. The light has been transformed into darkness. Pain is there. Falsehood is there. How much falsehood gets into love-based relationships? I don't have to discuss that. And of course, the final thing is death. So we have to keep referring back to that psychic entity. There's another, we have to keep bringing poetry in. A few more lines from Savitri. Another way to understand love. Love as a bud. Love as an unopened flower. So this is in, I believe, in the book of love itself, where Sri Aurobindo writes, love dwells in us like an unopened flower, awaiting a rapid moment of the soul. What I am calling as psychic, you can also understand it as soul. Or he roams in his charmed sleep mid thoughts and things. In the middle of thoughts and things, love sleeps or roams in his charmed sleep. The child God is at play. Love is like a child God. The child God is at play. He seeks himself in many hearts and minds and living forms. He lingers for a sign that he can know, and when it comes, wakes blindly to a voice, a look, a touch, the meaning of a face. Now think of it as, how do two people fall in love? It can be a look, a voice, a touch, or a meaning of a face. There is some sort of recognition. Something in us recognizes something in the other, and love blossoms like an unopened flower. Depending on what in us has recognized what in others, the purity or the intensity of that force can change. But it dwells in us. Love is in us. Some of you said that in the beginning, right? Love is in us. So it dwells in us like an unopened flower, waiting for its time to blossom. And these are some of the things Sri Aurobindo describes. It goes a little bit more further, but we have more time to discover this. Another thing about love, love is not just, in some religio-spiritual traditions, we think of divine only as love. That is true, but love, divine is has many more aspects than only love. And it's only in the Indian religio-spiritual tradition where we call divine as Purna, complete. So there can be many other forces, many other aspects to divine. So divine also kills, right? We have stories of Rama killing Ravana and so many other asuras. Krishna though has killed so many, there is no count of that. These are the stories we have grown up with. So there is this aspect of divine as well as force, as power, one that destroys, right, certain things. But interestingly, what Sri Aurobindo is reminding here is that these are not two contradictory aspects. They are just two aspects of the one. So what I've picked up this line is, the God of force, the God of love are one. Not least he loves. This is from one of his poems, Epiphany. Not least he loves whom most he smites. And I'll tell you a story about this as well. Not least he loves whom most he smites. Sometimes we think everybody around me is having a very happy life. I am the only one who is getting all the smiting from the God. Everything that is going wrong, God has chosen me only, for all the troubles. So it's like God is, doing something. God, it's a God smite on us. But what Sri Aurobindo is reminding is, not least he loves whom most he smites. Think of all the blows that come in life from nature, universe, God, whatever term you are comfortable with. Think of it as the gift of love. And then it becomes a means for progress. That in fact, it's a truth of sadhana, it's a truth of yoga. When everything seems to go just, textbook like, think of it as that God isn't even looking at you. God is allowing you to just go through, just like jaise chal raha hai, up and down, this and that, fine. But when you get more and more severe blows, it's like God has turned his eye on you or her eye on you, depending on whatever pronoun one is comfortable with, or it. And now that Supreme wants you to progress at an accelerated pace. Hence come the blows. So not least he loves whom most he smites. So this idea of God of love and God of force being one. And I go back to the example I think Jayashree ji was sharing about Devaki giving up her son. Not just Krishna, but 7 other children before, right, who were given to Kansa for just to be killed because the 8th child had to be born. You know the story, right? So Devaki, the kind of blows Devaki got in life, that only your 8th child will rescue you from this asura that Kans is, who was her brother, right? Not even some outsider, her own brother, who was this, who had created all this havoc, not just for her, but the entire city, entire kingdom. Your 8th child, that means she has to sacrifice her first 7 born, so that 8th one can be born, and that child will rescue humanity from the horrors, from the chaos that Kansa was creating, right? That's the kind of blows that sometimes God gives. But because it was God's love for Devaki, that she was the instrument that was chosen, her womb was chosen for the birth of divine incarnate Shri Krishna, right? So she was the one who was loved the most, but on surface she was also given the highest blows. To let go of a newborn, kill it, right? There is another beautiful story in our tradition which speak of the idea of God of force. Force can also be conscious force. And I'm thinking if it is this one. No, I'll tell you that story a little later. Yeah. In its essence, love is one, just as consciousness is one. But in the manifestation, it is colored and differentiated by each individual nature. There was a song long time back in some Hindi film, I don't remember, the song was in English, or at least this word was in English. One love, one love, one love. I don't know if you remember it. A few years ago, Abhishek Bachchan was there. That's all I remember, huh? Thus, one love, one love, one love. Right. So you see, sometimes these composers or lyricists, they just capture these, because these truths are truths of existence. So in its essence, all love is one. But it gets colored and differentiated because of different nature. So a mother's love for a child, for example, will be of one color. A child's love for the mother will be of another color. We say this all the time, that mothers and fathers love differently, right? That's again a differentiation of temperament and nature. Husband and wife, the day they are married, it's a different kind of love. Before they are married, lover and beloved, it's a different kind of love. Initial phase of dating, different kind of love. Then love keeps changing. So it keeps changing different forms, different colors, but essentially it is one. Now, earlier I was talking about, how Sri Aurobindo writes. love dwells in us like an unopened flower and it waits till it recognizes a touch, a look, something like that. There is another beautiful way he describes that. What is love? Love is nothing but the self recognizing the self. Now this self is important. Now you've seen the capital S written, not the chota S-E-L-F. And Sri Aurobindo had this technique of using capital letters and lower letters to distinguish, with between the words, so as to show what is related to ego and what is related to divine. So S with the capital S, self, is nothing but the Atman in Indian context. That divine entity which is actually the same as that supreme source, but it is mentioned in our Upanishads, it is sometimes as tiny as the size of one's thumb. And look at it again, in our ordinary understanding, we all can copy each other's signature, but we can never copy each other's thumbprint. That's why when you go and get your Aadhaar or citizenship papers or whatever, passport, they ask you to put your thumbprint or even like all fingerprints, because that's our unique identity. Signature is just something that we have made up as we become more civilized. But this is the unique identity. That is the true self within. Right? So love is this Angusht Matra self, recognizing the Angusht Matra self in others, which may in the manifestation look different, but are essentially one. And when this little self recognizes that other little self in the other, if love can stay at that level, it's a very pure love. Because it is the Atma recognizing the Atma, right? It is the soul in me recognizing the soul in you. But generally what happens is, it's the little self recognizing something else in the other. And that little self is a combination of our mind, vital, and our physical preferences and things like that. Oh, I like people with, this kind of complexion. All the preferences come in. Or I like people of a certain body type, or I like this color hair, or this color, she is beautiful, or he is handsome, or he is not that beautiful. All those preferences. It's those things that can create difficulties, because those things change, right? Habits change. Mental ideologies change. Our ideas change. So should we stop loving the other person? Because, there was, you used to believe in this way, now you are saying something else. You are not consistent, so I can't love you anymore. Right? So it's these vital mental preferences that keep changing. But if it is the deepest self with the capital self, recognizing that same self in you, but in its different manifestation, then that love is the one which can continue to experience that eternity and intensity. And in one of the Upanishads, we have a story about this, where there was a Rishi Yagyavalkya, and he had two wives, and Maitreyi and Katyayani. Katyayani was the more of the worldly type, and Rishi Yagyavalkya had his own Gurukul, and Katyayani was helping with the Gurukul ashram, doing all the things that needed to do. Maitreyi was more of the introspective sadhika type, and when time comes for Yagyavalkya to leave his ashram and go for some deeper sadhana by himself, he divides his property between both his wives, and he says, okay, Katyayani, you take this, and Maitreyi, you take this, and I am going as take sannyas. We don't know, because I don't think he ever took sannyas. The story is there, because Rishi Yagyavalkya was quite a practical sage. He is, by the way, the source of Isha Upanishad that some of you read. So then Maitreyi asks, Katyayani is happy, okay, I'll take care, you go, whatever you need to do. Maitreyi asks, if all that you are leaving behind, is this going to help me find that self that I have heard you so many times talk about in your, with your shishyas and all that? So then he sits her down and they have a beautiful discourse, and in that discourse he tells something which is relevant to us. He says, well, not for the sake of the wife a man loves his wife, but for the sake of his self. Not for the sake of the husband a wife loves her husband, but for the sake of herself. Not for the sake of a person loves his or her friend, but the sake of the self. Not for the sake of the child a parent loves his or her child, but for the sake of self. Right? So this discourse goes on, and then they find out what is this self. Because on the surface, this seems like a very egoistic statement, right? Not for the sake of the wife, a husband loves the wife, but for the sake of the self. And Sri Aurobindo unpacks it in one of his writings, where he says, yes, surface reading will make it sound like as a super egoistic statement. I love you not because who you are, but because I love myself. But only when you are stationed at the lower S wala self. But the moment you change that small s to the capital S, I love you because you're not separate from my Atman, my highest self. You are one with that. Right? A parent loves the child not because the child has come from her, but the child is that same self which she is or he is. If that realization can come in, then that statement makes so much sense. Otherwise, it's all like, my self-love. I love you because I love myself. Let me see how much you can help me feel good about myself. And that's when I will love you. That's how or why I will love you. Right? The more you can help me aggrandize my ego self, the more I will love you. That's not the kind of love that Yajnavalkya and Maitreyi were discussing. Right? So love is nothing but the self recognizing the self dimly or clearly, and therefore seeking to realize oneness and the bliss of oneness. Love is the turning of the self. Now that I've told you the story, this will make sense. Love is the turning of the self, the Atman, from its false self in the mind. The lower self is the falsehood. You remember that Asura, the false self in the mind or the body, through its true self in another. Love requires two. So always the two have to be there. Otherwise, what will love do, right? So love always requires two, but the recognition of same one in the other. Right? So self and other are essentially one. That's a precondition of love. Love is the turning of the self from its false self in the mind. Mind is the cause of separativeness. Or body, bodily we are separate, that doesn't take any thinking. To its true self in another, I love him because I have discovered the very self of me in him. Not my body or mind or tastes or feelings, but my very self of love and bliss. As long as we stay with these things of body, mind, taste, feelings, preferences, this, how happy you can make me feel, are our tastes similar, are our thoughts similar? We are not ready to recognize the self with the capital self, the Atman in another. Yeah? So one last thing and then I will stop this session. One of my favorite aphorisms of Sri Aurobindo. I'll read it and then maybe some of you can decode it from me. God has so arranged life that the world is the soul's husband. Soul, self, same thing. Krishna, its divine paramour. Paramour is the secret lover. We owe a debt of service to the world and are bound to it by a law, a compelling opinion. Even dharma can be understood as law. We are bound to world. We owe a debt of service to the world and are bound to it by a law, a compelling opinion. सब लोग कहते हैं करो. And a common experience of pain and pleasure. But our heart's worship and our free and secret joy are for our lover. Now, who is the lover and who is the husband? The world is the husband to whom we owe a debt of service. Samajik compulsions, opinions, dharma, all these things that have come up. We owe a debt of service to the world, but the secret joy of heart and love are reserved for that secret lover who is Krishna. Let's read it again. God has so arranged life. It's not that we have done it. That's how the world exists, he's writing. That's how this Srishti exists. That the world is the soul's husband. Now, it does not mean that the world cannot be a soul's wife. It's just he's writing it as a wife, as a woman. He is actually at one place he writes that I thought I knew what love was until I became a woman and then I became love. He's talked about it how women are much more able to love much more deeply than men. That's why Savitri, it's the female. He uses the word woman, woman, woman again. So there is something about the way nature, that divine Shakti is working, that those who are born in a woman's body generally are much more capable of loving with much less conditions than others. But it does not mean that we cannot all grow in it, because the masculinity and the femininity are all in us, right? And yet there is something about the womanly expression of love which is much more profound and deep, which is why all bhakti poets have also thought of themselves as a woman when they are writing bhakti poetry. All Vaishnav poetry, right? Sufi, so it just comes naturally to that. So in that spirit he's writing. So the life is been so arranged that the soul has to have a husband, and that is the world. Sab ghar ke we do it, we do everything that is needed because it is a law, it is dharma, it is a compelling opinion, and we owe a debt. We should do it. But this in secret, the purest love is reserved for that secret paramour, that lover, that Krishna. Yeah? Does that make sense? Or maybe over the next day and a half it will make more sense. So we love every human relationship. We owe we have a debt to them. We serve them. We give ourselves to them to whatever extent possible, with as much unconditionality as we can bring in, with all our inner self giving and everything. And yet, remember that there is that secret lover, the secret paramour, the Krishna, which is still waiting. And all the joy, the heart's worship and joy and free self-giving is reserved for that source. So you see, in India, we don't necessarily distinguish between human love and divine love. Human love can be a practice field to grow into divine love, but human love comes with lots of other problems, like that ego thing is always there, the ego, right? But divine love, the more we can purify that ego keep the ego out of the equation, the more purification of human love can happen. And our next session will talk a little bit about human love and divine love. But I just wanted to put this idea out there, and then hopefully over the next day and a half, we'll be unpacking some of these ideas. Yeah? So any quick questions or anything before we take a break? I think our break is at 11. Okay. Yeah, this is a beautiful painting, right? I love this. This is by a Chennai-based artist, Keshav. Every day he makes a new Krishna. During Navaratri, he'll make a new Devi. Certain days he'll make Ram or other deities as well, but his name is Keshav, so he just puts out. You can actually Google Krishna for today. That's what his website is. Krishna for today. So, yeah. Right? So, there's one. Self-recognizing the self. Any questions, comments, sharings?